All right, so let's get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Perrello. I'm the Director of Career Services at the School of Information Studies. My job is to make sure that all of my fabulous students, some of my iSchool students, are prepared for taking on their great internships and eventually getting those full-time jobs. It's no confusion that this year has been a very bizarre year for students for getting internships and jobs. But let me be very honest with you, the resume has not changed. We're still looking at the same typical resume format that we did last year and the year before that. Just a little bit about my presentational style. I do tend to rush because I'm a New Yorker at heart. So if I'm going too fast, please just let me know. You could chat, send a little chat and let me know. I will try to be monitoring that as much as possible. And so let's get started, shall we? So being resume ready, there's a reason for that, clearly. We are working towards our iSchool STEM career fair. This is not just the iSchool taking part in this. This is also the School of Engineering and Computer Science, as well as Arts and Sciences, who's going to be joining us too. It's going to be the STEM career fair. It's going to be virtual again. It's on Thursday, February 18th. You can register on Handshake. And I'd say the biggest piece of knowing that the career fair is on Handshake is also making sure that your profile is set to public, because you're going to want all those employers to be accessing your profile as they are meeting with you during those sessions. We will be having a virtual career fair prep session later this week, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that momentarily. This is an Eastern time zone, so we are doing it from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Business casual and a strong Wi-Fi and secluded location is highly encouraged. And like I said, please update your Handshake profile and set your profile to public. Other workshops we have coming up in preparation for the STEM career fair. Tomorrow night, we have crafting your cover letter. Jeff Fouts will be doing that session at 8:15. Wednesday night, we're doing prepping for the virtual STEM career fair. If you have no clue what a virtual career fair is, I highly encourage you to attend that. And then Thursday night, we are doing the art of networking and informational interviewing. So if you have any questions about how to network with alumni, how to connect with recruiters on LinkedIn, and then how to finally engage in conversation with them, you're going to want to attend that session Thursday night. Also next week, for our international students who are joining us, we're doing career advice for international students, a great panel with some wonderful alumni working at big, sexy companies. I highly encourage, if you're an international student, to attend that session. And then finally, next Thursday night, we are doing interviewing in the age of COVID. So case study interviews, behavioral interviews, they've all changed with doing things virtually. So those are the workshops coming up. And then my last, I guess, good transition into being resume ready is that Syracuse University has licensed an amazing platform for you to get 24-hour resume reviewer service. If you are a Syracuse University student, I highly encourage you to go to vmock.com/SU. You can get real-time resume feedback, and it's based on your home college's resume templates. So if you are an iSchool student, then we have put in a few iSchool related resume templates that will help try to guide you as your resume is being reviewed by this artificial intelligence tool. It's certainly not perfect, but when I meet with students the first time, their resumes already look a lot more polished because they've had the opportunity to get their resume reviewed through VMock. And so you can access that using that link right there. All right, so again, like I said, I'm a pretty informal presenter. So if you have any questions, you can either unmute yourself and just kind of interrupt, which is totally fine. Or you can type your question in the little chat box area, and I will try to get to it in due time. I also would recommend that if you have any specific questions, perhaps you just hold off on those until the end of the session. Chances are it may get answered in one of the slides, or someone else may have that same question and may ask it as well. So without further ado, your resume has to tell a story. We have to stop thinking about our resumes as one-dimensional documents. believe it or not, these are the make all break all documents that could very possibly get us that interview at the end of the day for whatever internship or job we're looking at. And so we can never underestimate how important it is that your resume be ready at all times, because you never know when you're going to have to submit it for an application. So take time to reflect on your own story. What is it that's made you who you are as a young emerging professional? And guess what? It's okay if you only have those retail jobs or those fast food jobs, or perhaps maybe a camp counseling gig that you did in high school. Those are all positions that I want you to try to, in a positive way, exploit on your resume, so that way the employer can get a good sense of who you are. You don't want to leave any guessing games up to the employer or to your audience. You need to be informative, and indeed you need to be persuasive. So you've spent your whole life becoming who you are, but what is your personal value proposition? Think of yourself as a product for sale. When we're trying to market on commercials, YouTube, trying to do something maybe in online, we're trying to catch the audience's attention. Well, what is it in your professional body of work that makes you stand out from the crowd? So think about the value that you offer, not just as someone who's in college or as an undergrad or graduate student, but as someone who's on the market for an internship or a job. What makes you the shiny, lucrative object? So tell me your story, and you've just got a few seconds to get me hooked. We have to keep in mind that resumes are sort of those items that employers and audience members will simply just glance at and will make a split decision within a few seconds, whether or not you may seem like a good fit. Is that fair? No, it's not fair at all. Which is really important, why to make sure that you are trying to create your resume to be indicative and symbolic of all of your work, what's most relevant to the role that you are applying for, and the why, the so what behind it. So resumes are linear media, so organization and sequence is really going to be important to get to the plot quickly. For students, this sequence tends to work. There are exceptions to these rules, and they're not written anywhere in a Bible or a constitution. So most of the time we want our students to start with education at the top, expected and completed. If you are a freshman or a sophomore undergraduate student, then it's very likely you're still going to have your high school or your secondary school on your resume. That's totally fine, that's okay. But keep in mind that your most recent education has to come first. So if you're a student at Syracuse University, that degree will come first in your list of schools and education. Relevant coursework, especially in priority order, if you're applying for a more, let's say, data science heavy position, then you're going to want to put those data science classes first and foremost as relevant coursework. You may also not want relevant coursework on your resume if you've already had amazing work experience or great internships. And in the scheme of things, coursework may not be the most important thing, but it does tend to bridge the academic with the practical. Professional experience, and let me emphasize here, it's not just paid work, project work. It could be work that you've done voluntarily. That could be considered as professional experience too. Just because you are on payroll does not mean, or if you were not on the payroll does not mean that it's not professional experience. Academic projects, only those relevant to your story. If you are applying for a project management role, having a data analytics project on your resume may not be very relevant. And so you may be wasting the space. So think about that. Technical skills, match the level to the job or internship you want. Don't lie. I'd also be careful with the way you articulate certifications on your resume, and I'll get to that in a few slides. Community engagement or voluntary stuff, only the things that matter. Often college students look really good when they do volunteer work or philanthropy when they're undergrads, grad students, because you are in school. And so for you to go out of your way to do something voluntarily will often look really good on a resume. And then finally, relevant honors that show impact or distinguishing traits. If you are in the Renee Crown Honors Program with Arts and Sciences, you need to say what the Renee Crown Honors Program is. Don't just expect your audience to know what that is. Same thing with scholarships or awards that maybe you've made that are local or campus related. You're going to want to give a little description to give it some weight. We don't want to admit it, but your resume is called your silent sales representative. You don't have your voice to accompany your resume when you submit it online into that vast universe of resumes, right? It would be a little different if it was a video resume and you could actually deliver your personality, your charm, your smile, your wit, and all those other characteristics to your resume. But the truth is that that resume is very needs to give a good picture about who you are within a short period of time. We have to also keep in mind that it's a persuasive document, that this needs to be tailored to the skills and the position that you're applying for. It's not easy when you're applying for an internship, right? You're thinking, well, I don't have the experience. I'm trying to frame my resume in a way that makes it look like I have the experience in order to get the experience. How exactly do I do that? Well, clearly you can do that with academic projects. You can do that with any part-time work that you've done, on-campus work, course projects, or volunteer opportunities. And I'll get more into that soon. Recruiters only take on average 6 seconds to scan over your resumes. It's actually less than that when we're talking about a career fair situation. No research has been done yet in the virtual career fair world on resume reviews. But the truth is that when when an employer is trying to make a decision in a short period of time, they're not going to spend 5 to 7 minutes looking at your resume. There is one caveat to that and one exception, and that's if you're a library student. If I have any of my fabulous library information science students on the call tonight, just know that that's a totally different ballgame, and they will be taking the time to read your resumes. Your resume must gain and maintain what we call positive attention to lead to the interview. That's the reason why the resume is so important in the process. And then finally, think like a boss. Would you hire you? Well, obviously I'd hire myself, right? What are you talking about, Christopher? Content of resumes. You want to make it easy for the interviewers to locate you. Have your name bolded at the top with an email address and a phone number. Is your mailing address necessary? Not really, not anymore. Employers don't tend to look at the mailing addresses. I'd say that a mailing address really comes in handy if it has to do with the location you're looking to move to, right? So if you're looking for a New York City internship for the summer and you have a Westchester County or a Long Island or a New York address, that's going to probably have a little bit more positive influence. If not, just leave your mailing address off. They're not going to be mailing paper checks to you, so you don't need to worry about that. Also, it's becoming more common these days that we do not include career objectives on a resume. And the reason why employers don't typically like to see career objectives on a resume is because they don't often say anything important, right? They're usually these awkwardly worded, disjointed sentences, if not even not complete sentences, that don't really speak much to your resume or really don't give your resume much enhancement. They'd much rather you just save that space for a skill or something more relevant and applicable to the position that you're applying for. Now, if you're not submitting a cover letter with your resume, and you should almost always be doing that, but if you're not submitting a cover letter, then the resume objective may be a little bit more useful. Other than that, the career objectives went out with the resume in like 1988. By the way, I kind of made that up. I don't really know if it was 1988. The more relevant your resume is, the better chance you have to get that resume picked up. I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories about applicant tracking systems, but I do want you to be aware that a lot of companies these days do tend to use ATS, applicant tracking systems, in which they could very well be feeding your resume and your cover letter through a software database to pick up as many useful job or internship description buzzwords that were in that job and internship to try to weed out the resumes and cover letters that don't seem relevant. My rule with this is to never force information on your resume simply because you're trying to make it tailor to an applicant tracking system. My advice to you is to try and make sure that your resume is fitting for every position that you're applying for, but don't overdo it because it's going to come across as perhaps phony and it may not be getting the genuine communication through to the audience. What about a summary section or qualification sections? I'd say someone like me, who I'm a 38-year-old, or I've been in, working for 15 plus years. Someone at my age and stature could very well have a qualifications or summary portion on top of the resume because I'm old, right? If you are a new graduate or an undergraduate, a grad student, if you've only been in the business for 5 to 10 years, you are not going to need a qualifications or a summary section. The only time I recommend adding a summary or qualification section to your resume is if the employer comes out and asks for it, and you'll know if that's the case. And then finally, your skills have to matter, right? It's almost like if you are taking the time to go to the gym to work out, you want to make sure that hour you're spending at the gym is significant and you're making it count, right? Same thing with your resume. You want skills on your resume that actually hold weight and that actually communicate something. So I suggest leaving off what I call empty skills. So for instance, on someone's resume, you may see skills, right? Somewhere on their resume, and it may say time management, public speaking, collaboration, teamwork, resilience. Those are skills that I don't want you to just have on your resume as just hanging out as words. I want you to back them up. So don't tell me that you have public speaking skills. Show me that you've taken a public speaking class on campus or at Syracuse University to show that you have public speaking skills. If you want to show that you have collaboration and teamwork skills, list something that you've done in a group project or maybe an academic project to bring that collaboration skill to life, all right? So say no to empty skills. The aesthetics of a resume, there are a lot of different opinions on resumes. Students who come see me, I give them resume advice. They may go to Jeff Fouts, my colleague, and he may say something totally different. That's okay. We all have opinions on resumes. And so sometimes you have to take what someone's gonna critique your resume with a grain of salt. But the aesthetics of the resume matter, right? Like no one wants to look at a resume that looks cluttered or that looks tattered or is too heavy on text, or frankly, that's too skimpy on text. That your resume has to have a good balance of white space. It's got to be consistent. It's got to have a pleasing font. The alignments all need to match up. And that's why submitting a resume as a PDF document is super important. And consistency, again, is one of the most other important pieces of resume writing, that if you are using one font to create headers or subheaders, you're going to want to use that same font. You're going to want to use the same font size or the style that you use. This isn't a perfect resume that I'm showing here, but it's there to show you that there's balance, there's white space, there's not too much text on that resume. Because what you do, if you have too much text or if your resume looks slightly offensive aesthetically, is that your resume may automatically be going into the no pile, and no one wants that. Education on resumes. So I'm just gonna say, if there are any Newhouse students on this call, your education goes at the bottom. Everyone else is on campus. If you're an iSchool student, your VPA, your Whitman, engineering, your education will go at the top, all right? I don't know why Newhouse tells their students to put their education at the bottom. That's just how that industry is. But your education otherwise should always go first on your resume, and you're going to want to list your degrees or training in reverse chronological order. So you're going to start with your BS or your Bachelor of Science if you're in the bachelor's program, or perhaps an MS or Master of Science if you're in the master's program. Please be careful with your English grammar and syntax. It is Bachelor of Science, not Bachelors of Science, and it's not plural possessive or possessive or anything like that. It's just Bachelor of Science. So that's a good, weird random English writing rule. Or listed as BS or MS. Please know what degree program you're in. It's kind of embarrassing when I see a student put a BA for their Bachelor of Science in information technology. List your degree, diploma, date of graduation, school, location, majors, minors, and concentrations. Look, your concentration does not have to be on your resume or have to be on your transcript to include that on your resume. If you think that you're going to go for the project management concentration, put that on your resume, right? You're not lying. I mean, if you decide to change, then obviously change it. Same thing with a minor. Just because you haven't declared a minor yet doesn't mean you can't put that on your resume. GPA is important for internships. It's not as important for full-time jobs unless you're going for one of the super fancy, Deloitte's or Ernst & Young's or, JP Morgan Chase. Other than that, the GPA is going to be really important for your internship, mainly because they want to know that you're not going to flunk out of school before, when they hire you to do a summer internship. And that has happened. I'd hate to say it. They're typically looking for a 3.0 or better. Now, not everyone has a 3.0. If everyone had a 3.0, that would kind of, make GPAs pointless. I mean, they are kind of pointless to begin with. But if you do not have a 3.0 GPA or better, then I would get creative. I would actually perhaps put major GPA or program GPA, because typically your major GPA is higher than your overall GPA or your cum GPA. The key is not to make it look like you're trying to hide something. And most of the time, internships will be totally fine seeing that you have your major GPA on your resume, because they care more about your resume, your major, right? They're not going to care so much how you did in, Reformation Europe or high and late Middle Ages. They don't care about that. Finally, relevant coursework section is great for transferable skills for an internship. So perhaps you're new in the Library Information Science graduate program and you came from maybe a history background. Well, add a relevant coursework section on your resume if you're applying to internships, so that way they can see the Library Information Science classes you already took. Same thing as an undergrad. If maybe you're a freshman, a first-year student, and you're looking for a summer internship, you're going to want to put some of those first semester courses that you've taken, maybe throw on a few of the spring classes that you're going to start taking as of February 8th. So a relevant coursework section is typically very encouraged when it comes to our students' resumes, but don't try to force it on there if you don't have enough room, because in the end, coursework may not be what's getting you that interview. Relevant experiences on resumes. So this is just one way of laying it out. Again, we're looking for aesthetics, we're looking for consistency, and we're going to look for those skills that have a little bit more weight behind them. So this is just an example. It's social media consultant, obviously a student on-campus job at Syracuse University, and they list the position. The position, if you notice, is in bold. That's because the position is often going to have more weight for your application process rather than the place that you are working at. Some people tend to only bold the place, and it's like, no, I'd rather you bold the position, because that's going to say more about the job or the internship that you're applying for. And also notice here the power verbs and the metrics that are used in these bullets. Developed and executed social media marketing strategies for School of Information Studies, created Facebook and Instagram pages and gained over 6,500 followers, utilized social media statistics to enhance Facebook and Instagram accounts, trained SU administrative and professional staff on the execution of social media marketing use. Notice that these bullets are succinct, they're clear, they're being very obvious about what things were performed and the tasks that were completed on the job. The power verbs developed, executed, created, utilized, trained, those are all terms that are going to add much more lexical weight to your resume, and why that's going to be important. If you also notice the 6,500 plus followers is really important, because that will give a quantifiable measure to the influence that we've had in the role. Leadership and soft skills. So look, I mean, if you're looking to go to any of the big four, EY, Deloitte, PwC, KPMG, if you're looking to go to any of those larger, more well-established firms, they're going to want to see a separate section on your resume called leadership. And it's really important that you have that leadership section on there, and that it is in fact leadership that you're trying to express in that part on your resume, because they want someone who's more than just a worker. A lot of these companies want leaders. And so if you're looking to go to any of these larger, more well-established companies, you're gonna wanna have a leadership section. And let's remember what leadership is. It's the action of leading a group of people or an organization. Unfortunately, I have to point that out, because sometimes I have students who will put that they donated blood as a leadership skill. And look, donating blood is an amazing act of citizenship. It is a very positive step for public health policy and that sort of thing. But unfortunately, we can't say that donating blood is leadership, right? We've got to do something more influential, sitting as a chair of philanthropy in a fraternity, or perhaps being treasurer in the graduate student organization. So let's keep in mind what leadership is. Also, they're going to want to see, and this isn't just the Big Four, every employer wants to see that you have demonstrated soft skills: public speaking, collaboration, management, critical thinking, diversity on social institutions. These are soft skills that I highly encourage you to work on while you're at Syracuse University, so that way they can come through very powerfully on your resume. Technical skills on your resume. I'm just going to say, don't lie about technical skills. So I've seen this before where students will put Python or Excel on their resume. Yeah, they've taken a Python class. Yes, they may know how to do a pivot table here and there, but unless you're really well, well-versed in any of those technical skills, don't put them on your resume, right? Like if you are not looking for a position with Python, then don't put Python on your resume, because that's just going to be a disaster unless you really want to do that, right? So don't list everything you've ever used. Connect the dots with what you're looking for. So if you're, interested in data analysis, then it will be important to put R Tableau on your resume. If you're maybe project management, you're going to want to put that you know how to use Microsoft Project. Just listing the technical skills isn't always the best use of space on a resume. Sometimes actually adding in a project that you've worked on where you've used Python or you've used Microsoft Project or Tableau would be much more beneficial to show your audience that you've actually used those skills other than just listing them. And then finally, don't randomly bold terms. It's usually the grad students, and I don't know why, I'm not sure who tells them to do this, but sometimes my wonderful, amazing grad students will just randomly bold and italicize like the skills on their resume, and don't ever do that, because that's very distracting to the audience, and the employers do not like it. Part-time job bullets. So I have students all the time saying, well, I worked at McDonald's, or I worked as a babysitter, or I was a camp counselor or a lifeguard. The truth is that those positions matter, right? Those positions not only show that you've worked in the trenches, they also demonstrate that you know how to work with customers, often difficult clients, right? Sometimes they will make sure that they show time management skills and collaboration, and you know how to listen effectively. Those part-time jobs make a big difference. So I highly encourage students to put on any of those part-time jobs that you've had. It doesn't matter what it was. And here's an example. If you may, we don't want you to say worked at a busy high-end restaurant, right? Like that's what are you saying there? So instead, saying manage and prioritize multiple tasks such as customer seating, phone calls, to-go orders, cash out, cleanup, and restocking, right? So you're taking this, what you think is a rinky-dink waiter job or busboy job or whatever, and you're actually now making it sound pretty evolved and fabulous in a way. So that way you're getting noticed. Same thing with work as a camp counselor. Don't ever have work, right? Worked as, or completed. You want these terms to be weighty. So here's another example: organize and lead a variety of small and large group activities such as crafts, nature, songs, games, opening and closing ceremonies, and sports. So you're able to take these positions, these part-time jobs, and actually make them more evolved and make them more relevant. And that's really going to be important as you're trying to look for an internship. Your skills have to have weight, right? And it's hard, I teach an interviewing class, and one of the units I teach in my interviewing class is how important lexicon is when you're trying to communicate the weight of something that you've performed on a task. So using terms like managed, increased, wrote, programmed, collaborated, those are all terms that are going to add a lot more oomph to your skills. So it's very important, and you can just simply Google power action verbs for your resume, and you can get like a million of these terms that you could use to try to color some of the basic skills that you've performed in other jobs. So instead of saying account manager for advertising agency, I would say managed 15 strategic accounts billing in excess of 15 million annually. By the way, that did not come off my resume. I'd probably be making a lot more money. Sold widgets to clients located in the Midwest. Instead of saying that, we say increased sales by 17% in a 5-state territory, right? We're now giving a lot more credence to that word, to the sold, increased. And then we're also giving the quantity, 17% in a 5-state territory. Responsible for writing user guides on a deadline. Instead of responsible for, let's actually say what we did. We wrote 6 user guides for 12,000 users 2 weeks before deadline. Experience programming in PHP. Experienced in a shopping cart for a Fortune 500 company in PHP. So some additional resume tips to look out for. And these are like the miscellaneous tips that after doing hundreds and hundreds of career counseling, resume review sessions, that I just really need to make sure that I am communicating to you folks tonight. Reverse chronological order is a must. You always want to do reverse chronological order. If at any point things are out of that reverse chronological order, the employer will use that as a pretty ridiculous way to just totally throw your resume in the no pile. So you always want to start with your most recent thing and work your way backwards. And that's tough. If you had a more important internship 2 years ago than you did this previous summer, that's going to be tough because you're going to want to put the most recent internship first. And if that second internship, the older one, had more important skills performed that you want to exploit, you may just want to leave off the more recent internship. Please don't list all of your work experience. I have been working since 1991 when I had a paper route. I don't even think that job exists anymore. I was a paper boy. The paper route was in my parents' name. I was probably totally illegal at the time, being a 9-year-old delivering papers to strangers' homes. But the point is I don't have that on my resume, right? Like I don't have 1991 on my resume because it's not relevant. And so you don't want to just list everything on your resume, every award you got in 7th and 8th grade, or every ice skating championship you did in 2014 and 2015. Some of that stuff you may want to keep for your LinkedIn profile, but not for your resume. So be careful with that. Analyze the job and internship description. I always say that you want to play connect the dots. So if the internship is asking for, a background in Microsoft Project and Tableau, then you're going to want to try to make sure that you include that on your resume. Again, don't force it, don't lie. And if you're not comfortable with that skill and you only have a little bit of exposure to that, you're going to want to make sure you put that on your resume. So that way they're not thinking that you're trying to oversell your skills. So your resume should always be 1 page. That's tough, right? Especially for usually my international students who I look at their resumes the first time and their resumes are 2 or 3 pages because that's okay overseas. But unfortunately in American business, that's not the acceptable way of doing resume length. Now, if you are a library information science student on this call tonight, you got it made, because most of the time a library student, especially when they're applying for an academic library position, your resume is going to be a CV and will have a lot more information on it. So if any of my library people are out there, don't stress. You can have more than 1 page resume. And everyone else is jealous of you. You also need space between each section and paragraph. This just makes your resume look more legible and more aesthetically pleasing. And then finally, do not use more than 2 fonts. That's because you're now going to be distracting your audience. There are some fonts that sorry about that, folks. You need space between each section and paragraph, so that way it makes your resume look more legible, more aesthetically pleasing, and they're able to kind of get a better glimpse at your work. Because if your resume looks too cluttered, then they're not even going to care what any of the information on it is. So that is my presentation tonight, Resume Ready. I know it's a very broad overview of what your resume should be looking like from afar, from an employer's perspective. My last sort of a tip to you guys before I throw it out to any questions is please, 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 before you sign up for an appointment with Jeff or myself, to use VMOC 24-hour resume review. I say go on tonight and upload your most recent resume. It doesn't matter how rough around the edges it is, you should upload that and just give it a whirl. If you're an on-campus iSchool undergraduate or graduate student, you can register for a 30-minute career counseling appointment with either Jeff or Fouts or myself on Handshake. We pretty much update our appointments weekly. I've set up a bunch of appointments, I think until the beginning of April. It's no surprise that students have already booked a bunch of the appointments, but Jeff and I will also be opening up more appointments as the semester starts as well. And you can do that by going to syr.joinhandshake.com/login. If you're an online student, so if you're an LIS or ADS student in the online program, you actually have your own special career services with fancier career people than me, I guess. And you can get an appointment by emailing careerservices@ischoolonline.syr.edu. And then lastly, let's connect on LinkedIn. If you are connected with me, or if you are not connected with me and you'd like to get all my updates and see all my amazing posts that I have for students who are looking for internships or full-time jobs, I highly recommend you connect with me on LinkedIn. All right, so I'm actually gonna stop recording right now and stop sharing and just see if anybody has any questions. You can throw it out. You can either unmute or you can type it in the chat box and I will open it up to questions now.